Hello, everyone. I want to welcome you to the Partner Alliance for Safer Schools faith-based webinar. We're going to talk a little bit today on some of the unique challenges we have in our faith-based schools and how we can help. Also want to thank you all for being here and as we kind of celebrate Safe School Week and that you could take this time to join us. And I also want to thank our panelists today for the content and everything that they're going to be able to provide us and being able to take time out of their busy days to help share some of their insights and knowledge. So to jump right in, I just want to let you know that we're going to start with kind of looking at the concerns that we have for faith-based schools, as well as talking about the people and the processes that are important when we're looking at developing a culture of safety in our faith-based schools, as well as some recommendations that we may have through the past guidelines, as well as some of the best practices that we're seeing from our panelists today. And then we'll certainly open it up for questions, so you can do that through the question and answer portion of the webinar. You can also do it through the web chat. So just send us any questions as you have those, and we will be happy to make sure that we get those taken care of. So I want to thank all of everybody again for being here, and especially to Denise, Patrick, and Dennis for um, being part of today's presentation. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our panelists. So we're going to begin with Stacy Dents with CareHawk. Stacy has over 25 years of experience in marketing and product management. Stacy brings a wealth of industry knowledge and expertise and has spent most of her career with companies that focus on K through 12 schools, safety communication systems. Stacy holds an MBA in marketing from Purdue University and her current role as Director of Product Management at CareHawk Inc. I've known Stacy now, well, we probably shouldn't say how many decades because that'll just date us. But I've known Stacy a long time, and emergency communication is something that she's had just an outstanding wealth of knowledge and help on how we're keeping our schools safe. So thank you, Stacy, for being here. Next, I want to introduce Dennis Russo. Dennis is a dedicated educator and safety professional with over 2 decades of experience spanning classroom, teaching, school administration, and district-wide leadership in school safety. He began his career as a social science teacher before moving into administration, where he gained extensive expertise in curriculum, staff development, and building positive school cultures. In 2018, Dennis was appointed as the first safety school specialist for Pinellas County Schools, a role created through the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School Public Safety Act. In his position, he oversaw safety and emergency preparedness initiatives for more than 150 campuses, conducted hundreds of site assessments, trained thousands of staff members, and collaborated with federal, state, and local partners to strengthen safety and crisis response measures. He also led the development of the district's threat management team and coordinated countrywide disaster prep- preparedness efforts, including the use of schools as hurricane shelters. Today, Dennis continues to advance school safety learning environments as the owner of the School Safety Specialist LLC, where he consults with schools, churches, and community organizations to design and implement comprehensive safety plans. Has recently joined the National Council of School Safety Directors, NCSSD, as the organization's administrator. He also serves on the past technical and compliance committees for the Partner Alliance for Safer Schools, contributing to national efforts that provide schools with practical, no-cost safety tools and guidelines. Dennis holds a bachelor degree in education from Ohio University and a master's in education leadership from Nova Southeastern University. He is certified through the Florida Department of Education as a school safety specialist, completed extensive training with FEMA, the U.S. Secret Service, and the FBI. A lifelong educator at heart, Dennis is passionate about fostering safe, supportive environments where students and communities thrive. So, Dennis, welcome, and I'm happy to be able to have your experience of one of the many things that we see in schools of kind of moving from education to safety. And finally, and most importantly, Patrick. Patrick, with over a decade of experience as safety and security law enforcement professional, he's an experienced law enforcement officer with a demonstrated history of working in the primary and secondary education industry. Skilled in law enforcement, safety and security, criminal investigations, crime prevention, and first aid, he holds a bachelor's degree focused in criminal justice law enforcement administration from the South Carolina State University. As an effective communicator, former trainer, mentor, motivational speaker, and influence mentor, his desire is to apply his knowledge hands-on experience, and exceptional interpersonal and strategic skills in a role that will leverage these experience and skills offerings. So I also want to welcome you, Patrick. Another thing that we see in schools as well is someone from law enforcement kind of coming into the education industry with school safety. So I want to thank you all again for being here. And I will introduce myself real quick. I'm Scott Lord. I've got a bachelor in fire safety, uh, emergency technology, and I also work with the PASS organization. I'm a founding member who also co-chairs the technical committee, works with the compliance committee and the oversight committee with PASS. So again, thank you all for being here. Thank you, Patrick, Stacy, and Dennis for being our panelists today. So for those of you who may not know much about the Partner Alliance for Safer Schools, our mission has been to be able to provide school administrators with information to implement best practices in security and providing that culture of safety for the school environment. One of the things that we recognize is that schools on their own have a unique set of challenges. And so, one of the things that we saw back in 2014 when we started the Partner Alliance for Safer Schools was recognizing that there's nothing out there. As an old fire guy who loves to read codes and research into how we can prevent fire and this sort of thing, it was amazing to see that we didn't have anything to help schools move forward. And so the Partner Alliance for Safer Schools was born from that, and we have celebrated now 11 years of being able to provide this information and provide this resource to our schools across the country. We are a 501 nonprofit organization. And one of the things that we look at and really strive for is to make sure that everything that we do is free. So I encourage you, if you haven't already done so, to check out the passk12.org website and look at our wealth amount of white papers and studies that we've done, as well as the new Rev 7 guidelines that I'll get into in a little bit later on in this presentation. With that, I want to go ahead and kick this off. So, when we discussed as a group, we talked a little bit about what are some of the unique challenges that we have with faith-based schools. So, we talk a lot about our public schools and what should happen with those, but our faith-based schools are a little bit different. And so, there's a variety of different things that are unique to our faith-based schools, and part of those are some of those concerns that are coming from the community or the congregation. So Patrick, I'm going to kind of have you just kind of start here of, you know, tell us kind of your journey and what you're seeing and how some of these concerns came up and how you overcame them at your district or at your school.
Thank you, Scott. I appreciate your introduction this morning. So I'm currently at Greater Atlanta Christian School. I'm approaching my third year here from an extensive career in law enforcement. The first thing I noticed in the private school sector here, specifically at my school, was that there was a desire for safety, but there was also a strong desire for us to be welcoming and opening to our community. And so, as most people know, those two things kind of conflict with each other as far as being safe and welcoming. And how do you get those two things to work? And so, when I first got here to the school, I noticed that we were very limited on the cameras that we had, and we were very limited on the type of security personnel we were using. And so, I had to enter into the conversation of you kind of get what you pay for in security. You can have someone that has a Walmart greeter background, not being disrespectful to Walmart in any way, shape, or form. Or you can have someone that is called to do security work, to be a professional that has dedicated their life to service and protecting others. Just like people are called to be teachers and pastors, people are called to work in the security field to be protective of others. And so once we started having that conversation, like, hey, let's bring in some high quality individuals that are extremely focused on safety and protection, but also good Christian people because we want to be welcoming. And the security team is the first face of our welcome, open environment, but we also give that sense of safety. So how do we start laying that out? First of all, we bring in very good people. And then we start building up the foundation of like, hey, we can't just have one person here, two people here. We're usually running three or four people on campus during the day, two in the afternoon, and then we have two overnight for the most part. And so we're providing that service to our families but you're also seeing that it's more than just a security person. It's not just something that you're wasting your money saying, hey, this is a security person. They're not engaged with us. They're not invested with us. Like, no, make them a part of your community. On my team, one of my young ladies, she leads we have this double Dutch jump rope competition team. She leads that team. One of our guys, he's a boat captain where he takes out the fifth graders on our science lab boats and he drives them around the lake with our science teacher. He engages in the learning experience. They participate in our community outreach activities like when we're donating food, they're there putting food together, they're walking over with the parents and the students, we're handing out stickers all day every day, just having that touch point of engagement where, hey, yes, we are here to provide you with some safety, but we also, more importantly, we're human beings and we're Christians and it's more than just a job. It's something that we're called to do, and so having that engagement in place is super important.
Patrick, I appreciate that. Yeah, that's one of the things I think that I really enjoyed with our conversation. And Dennis, I might see if you've got some comments as well. Just how we look at developing that culture of safety. When you talked about having that greeter or that safety person is not in their own siloed department, but more of how are we part of the entire organization and being able to provide not just that safety and security, but also being able to provide that welcoming environment. Dennis, what are some of the things that you've experienced there in the state of Florida?
Yeah, so when I first stepped into the private faith-based school systems to work some consulting with uh, reevaluating safety and security plans at schools, the one major difference between what I was doing in the public school sector and the private school sector was one of the key pillars that I tried to bring into the public schools, but was often a struggle, was getting the community's input. So on the faith-based side of things, it was the other side of the spectrum. We had to fully understand that the community and the congregation was a huge stakeholder. So um, getting input, uh, acknowledging that we're sharing space, um, and really formalizing the processes that were involved in sharing space was like a huge difference between public schools and faith-based schools. It's baked right into the nature of their facilities. So to me, that was the largest adjustment and kind of a new annex to my emergency plans was to formalize shared space agreements and getting community input as we were as we were building our knowledge base with the private school leaders on what safety and security should look like. We also had to bring in the community's voice to those new processes, sometimes leading to a vote. Um, and I wouldn't say a compromise, but it was actually fun reimagining safety with a more community focused approach. In the public schools, we could just kind of go in and say we're doing this, that, or the other. So I love what we've come up with in Florida at the private school and faith-based schools, where we can make it just as safe, just as secure, but with a welcoming approach to it. So that's kind of like my opening statement there.
All right, thanks, Dennis. Stacy, how about you? I know it's kind of the manufacturer perspective, but what are some of the things you're seeing in
Yeah,
the
I'll try
faith-based
to
schools?
bring a technical approach maybe to my answer and just remind people that, I know you have facilities that are kind of serving two purposes, right? So Monday through Friday, you're a school, and then on weekends and maybe after hours, you are a church or a worship space. And look holistically at that and select integrators who are used to working in worship spaces in schools. They exist. Look for, systems that can cover your whole building, all your buildings, and give you kind of you certainly can change how they work based on the, day of the week, but a single system should be able to help your entire building and meet all your needs. So look for those things.
Thank you, Stacy. And I wanted to kind of touch upon, if we could, Patrick, if I can go back to you. There's some pushback that I've seen a little bit more in faith-based schools than we've had in public schools, and maybe it's just because we've been doing a lot of our drills and that sort of thing more and more in the public schools. Maybe not. Maybe it's a little newer with the faith-based schools. But can you kind of talk through a little bit of the concern of trauma with, through incident drills and how you kind of was able to overcome that and some of those concerns?
Thank you, Scott. So I started when I got here, that was a very real concern about traumatizing the kids. And so that led me into a space of thinking it over and maybe coming at it from a different approach because I came from a public school. I was after being at Gwinnett County Police Department for a period of time, I went to the school police. And in the public schools, we would always do drills. It was never an issue. And then when I came to the private sector, it was very much concerned about the trauma. And so that put me in the space of how do I enter into a conversation where people are uncomfortable, but also on the other side of this conversation, that the way I think or from my experience, I don't want to have to ask certain questions at the on the back end of a chaotic event or a very bad event. I don't want to have to look at a parent and they ask, "Hey, did you do everything to make my child safe?" I want to make sure the answer to that question is yes. And so, how do I get that mentality in place for the school? Because I'm coming from a place of care, not from a place of fear. So, how do I get you to understand that? And so, I started the conversations of like, hey, I'm not saying that we need to make loud noises or scare them and put them in situations where they're just completely uncomfortable. But I do want to give them the tool set and also facing the reality that school shootings unfortunately happen. We can't pretend like they don't. It's uncomfortable and it's scary. I fully understand that, but I want to make sure that the students under my care in this community have been given the tools to give themselves a fighting chance and success. Yes, I am here to intervene and engage any problem that may come up, but I also want you to have that skill set. I can't just act like it's not taking place. And so that started me on the journey of let's start talking to parents and start getting parents comfortable. And that's getting up from behind the computer screen or from behind the email. And it's more so getting that face-to-face engagement to where that's not Greater Atlanta Christian has security. Like, no, Patrick works at Greater Atlanta Christian School. This is his background. This is what he's dedicated to. This is what he's given his life to. And that's not just a normal security guard over there. That's such and such, and that's such and such. So you start getting to know the personal people that are here, and having that internal team is very helpful because now it becomes a first name interaction. It's not just a random security person ran this drill for me. It was like, no, that's such and such, and this is such and such, and they're here every day. When I get on campus, I'm going to have an interaction with them. They're engaged with my child, and every conversation with my child is not about security. It could be about the game last night. It could be about like coming up next week, we're going to have a trunk or treat. It could be a random thing of random conversations, but it's the touch point of engagement and showing that human interaction side of yourself, the human side of yourself, to where, hey, I'm invested in you as a person. I'm invested in this community. And I want the very best for this environment, just like you do. But I also have to deal in reality that bad things happen. And I want us to have a plan in place because if something bad happens and then it gets worse because we didn't have a plan in place, or then we didn't give them the tools to succeed, to give themselves a chance, I don't want to have to answer that question when it was like, hey, was this worse than what it needed to be? I don't want to say yes to that. I want to say we responded quickly. Our kids knew what to do and we acted accordingly, and we were successful in our intervention of whatever the issue was.
Thank you, Patrick. And I tell you, it's something that hit me, especially as we've kind of talked a little bit more of just a lot of what you're saying is kind of what when my kids were in school of the favorite teacher. Why did they have that favorite teacher? And it was that relationship that was developed. And a lot of the passion that I hear from you is is very similar. It's just my job is to teach them safety and security, not necessarily math or English, but to give them those life skills. And I think that's something that's kind of a unique approach that I don't know that we've seen a lot in our public schools, but I think it definitely is something that we can learn from the faith-based schools and what you guys have done there at Atlanta. Dennis, how about you when you're looking at, some of that trauma incident? What did they do in Florida?
So I'd like to just start off with any faith-based school that if you were, and I've noticed this, oftentimes the safety director is wearing many hats. Safety director might just be one of them. So really lean on building a safety team at your school. Don't try to take it all on your own. Um, and if you say to yourself, well, everybody's doing 50 different things on my campus, I can't really just keep pulling people in for secondary and, third purposes. But again, what I've seen is that the community in the faith-based schools they have much more involvement. So I guarantee you that if you ask your community, for a parent who happens to be a law enforcement officer to be on your safety team, that would go a huge way. Maybe you have a psychologist, a parent who's a psychologist on your team, because in Florida, when we first went heavy into school safety after Stoneman Douglas, it was very heavy law enforcement. The beauty of my school district is they hired two of us to do, I hate to say it, but one person's job, but they recognize that having a police officer background and a school person's background, kind of doing the job together was so important, because drills were new to all these people and these families, and they could be traumatizing if we did them the wrong way. I would also say that with my faith-based schools, I often say there's a lot of nonprofit organizations out there that can give you guidance. PASS is a great one. We focus on, a certain aspect of school safety and security, but there's other nonprofits out there that I really suggest to the faith-based and private schools to reach out to and look at their resources, because some of them focus specifically on this. Their whole mission is to create age-appropriate drills and trainings for staff and students so they don't traumatize them, trying to keep them safe. So that's what we did. We looked for those national nonprofits that had a mission to do this, because again, the thing that I keep saying that the community pillar is huge and strong in the faith-based schools, but what I'm seeing the lacking of, the pillar that's the least built up, is the knowledge base of safety and security in the faith-based schools, because no administrator, even myself, was trained how to do this when we were going through our teacher trainings or administrative training. So it took a mentor or me reaching out and finding an organization that I could get some training in this aspect, and to have my partner, who is a former police chief, to teach me the policing side of things. But the balance, so again, that team, and if you can find a team of people, so I might be very good at creating the professional development for how we train the staff and the students. My police partner might be very good at the content of that. And then if I have a parent or a colleague that was a social worker or a psychologist, the three of us together would make sure that all parts of that training, the content, and the non-traumatizing versions of this would be all like kind of wrapped up in a bow. So teamwork.
Sounds good. Thanks, Dennis. And I agree. I think that's one of the things that we definitely preach at Pass is, that building a team. So I think we're going to talk a little bit about that a little later on. Stacy, a little bit from the technology side, as we do have kind of this unique thing of the student movement through different spaces where, we're not just confined to a school, we're more confined to a campus. What are some of the things that you're seeing just from a technology standpoint that might help our faith-based schools when we're looking at this? You kind of mentioned a holistic approach. What are some of the things that you've seen?
Right. So, I mean, definitely first step is holistic approach, right? You want to look at your every building. It may be one building, maybe it's two or three buildings, but look at it like a campus as you suggest. Think about the fact that no matter whether it's Monday morning or Sunday morning, you might have people in all parts of your building. You may have a church Bible study happening on Wednesday morning and students in classrooms in your school. You might use some of your school classrooms for Sunday school during worship. Those kind of things are really important to understand and then be able to communicate to all those buildings, be able to understand what doors you leave locked and unlocked and that based on what's happening on that day in your building, even on Sunday morning or during, scheduled worship. Maybe you keep that school, although you don't have to unlock every door in your building. Keep your school classrooms secured and just allow access to worship space. If there's no need to have access to worship space, have a single door that people who want to come in and but maybe have church or synagogue or mosque business come at a specific door that's separate from where the school is. There's lots of easy ways to do that without technology. Pass certainly has a whole set of guidelines that let people move up tiers and talk about what you should do for cameras, door access, being able to just make an announcement over speakers to all the locations on your campus, indoors, outdoors. Take a look at all that and start and move yourself up based on what you think your risk is, based on what the layout of your campus is. Those are all things to take into consideration. I think too, look at your church leadership. Sometime, depending on what faith you're practicing, you may have overriding church leadership, like national church leadership, that has some recommendations for you as well to manage this.
Excellent. Thank you, Stacy. All right, kind of moving on. One of the things Patrick had said one time when we were talking was, developing that culture of safety, and you spoke a little bit on it here, Patrick, but um, if you could kind of go through just a little bit of the processes that you have at your district and a little bit more into when you were talking about the people being called to serve, and how did you have those conversations when we're talking about reality versus feelings? I think that's probably one of those different things that we see from public schools is we've gotten to the point where we feel that safety and security and teaching it and doing the drills and that sort of thing is just something that just has to happen. But when we are talking a little bit more faith-based, we're talking about our congregation, and it's kind of a community onto its own and a little bit different. So can you kind of expound a little bit on those things that you've done?
So for me, the first thing I did, I took personal ownership. I'm the opposite of Dennis in this regard. I'm coming from the law enforcement side that's been involved in schools for a while. My counterpart, his name is Shane, he's been in education for an extended period of time. He has an overview and an understanding of what the school environment is, what the school culture is. So the first step I had to do was I had to learn because I was new to this environment. I needed to learn and invest in what the school culture was, what the environment would state we were currently in, and where we wanted to be or where we were going. And then once I gained an understanding of that, how do I incorporate the security aspect into that while also explaining that to Shane and vice versa? We're mirror images of each other, where he looks at things from the school's perspective and the school culture, and I look at things from the security aspect going into the school culture, but we fully understand both sides. And so we're able to talk, communicate back and forth, and then we can present ideas as a united front to the school. And it's not overly one-sided one way or the other. It is for our environment, this is the best fit for us. And so then it's also leaning into Pass. We became a Pass certified school just over 2 years ago. And it's been extremely helpful for us to say, hey, these are some things that we're really good at right now. These are some things that we're struggling at. And these are some things that we're okay, but we have a blueprint to go forward in the future. And we can probably can't do all of it at once, but we can set a 5-year goal, a 10-year goal that, hey, this is where we're going. This is what we're trying to get to try to make sure we're providing the highest education level possible, but we're also providing the highest safety and security level possible and making those two live in the same world when sometimes they conflict with each other as far as like how we want to present and interact. But hey, there's always a way when you have all sides talking to each other and engaging to get a full understanding of, hey, this is step one, this is step two, and understanding each environment, each building is going to be different at different levels. But let's get a plan in place and let's start going about it. And that can be as simple as let's get some guards on campus. Do we want armed or unarmed? How do we want our greeting to take place? What do we look like on the camera front? Do we need fences? Are we leaving our gates open or closed? If we're leaving them open, then I need security personnel to cover every open gate. All right. If we're closing them, how are we going to do our check-in and check-out points? What are those choke points so we can control that? At our school entrances, are we leaving all doors open so parents can just walk in any building? Or we're going to guide them to specific doors so where we can get them checked in and checked out? How do we have that touch point to where people are not just walking in the building, but we're actually getting that checkpoint of like, hey, how you doing? Checking their temperature to see if they're upset when they're arriving or they're just showing up to eat lunch with their child. So how do we get these multitude of layers in place to where it feels natural, it feels welcoming, but it's also serving a secondary purpose for us. And so we're making sure we're checking all those boxes in our buildings because for us, we have a campus, we're more set up like a college. And so we have these different campuses and different buildings, and each building has its own unique feel to it. And so being respectful to that environment, but also engaging from a security standpoint of, okay, we can be safe and welcoming. I mean, we can be welcoming, but also we need to be safe.
Excellent. And how are you having those conversations of, reality versus feelings? I know that you had touched upon this a little bit when you're talking about doing the trauma with the incident drills and, just kind of speak a little bit on that because there was one thing that really impacted me when we were talking was, that not all people are religious. So, there's just some different mindsets that are out there that are outside of your campus. So, how did you have some of those conversations?
So I started breaking that down. I learned very quickly it's easier to talk to a smaller group than it is a large group because everybody wants to have that opportunity to ask their questions. And I want the opportunity to hear their questions and answer them the best of my ability. And so about 2 years ago, originally we started with the teachers and we would do the math department, the science department, the athletic department, where that would break it down to 10 to 15, maybe 20 at the most in a room. And we would talk about things specifically for their building, their issue, their concern. And that way I could answer that specifically for their concerns. And once that repeated itself a good 10, 15 times, talking to the different departments, then we were able to scale it up. Let's start bringing parents in here, but not all of them at the same time. Let's do elementary, let's do middle school, let's do our young learners, let's do our high school, just breaking them up, having those quality conversations again, giving them the opportunity to ask as many questions as they want and let them understand the purpose of what we're trying to do. And then from there, we went to a larger scale conversations. So to answer your question, Scott, it was about doing the lead work and repeating myself multiple times to multiple different groups of people because it's not good enough to say it just one time. So, well, we had this conversation in August and it's December. That misunderstanding that would be my fault because I didn't send enough clear communication like, hey, this is what I'm trying to accomplish at our school. I want as many touch points as possible. I want to make sure that you know everybody on my team, not just me. I want you to know that you can go talk to anyone. We're fully engaged And we're also the most important thing is we're willing to listen. I'm not in an environment where I think I know everything, or I'm not aware of what I'm blind to. And so I'm always listening. I'm always willing to take in any advice, anything that you're seeing that I'm not seeing, and also I'm willing to respond to it. I think that's the most important part of it, which is a big part of past, where it's like laying out, hey, this is your strengths, this is where you're okay, these are your weaknesses. It's the same process, just on a person to person scale.
Outstanding. Stacy, as he kind of talked a little bit about that, being in communication, what are some of the things that you're seeing as far as how we can kind of clearly communicate the intent and help with those conversations and the ability to maybe even doing the training, of just kind of speaking a little bit to that of that consistency. I think you and I both can agree in emergency communication, one of the things that we say is that you've got to say the message 3 times for, when you alert it. You have to do this a certain amount of time. So can you speak a little bit on that, on
Sure.
just kind of what
I
Patrick
mean,
was
there's
saying? And
right. So, I mean, I would take into consideration the idea of like audible notification. So, very simply, a page. Most of the systems, not speaking for my own, but most of the systems on the market allow you to, set up a system that maybe only rang bells and did the school related everyday announcements in the school part of a building and still would allow you to do emergency communications, like audible emergency communications throughout the entire campus, including like the non-school public and worship spaces on your campus. And I think that's an important thing to think about. I think, the next level that PASS would recommend is taking a look at what kind of visual notification you can do during an emergency. Is there signage? Is there something as simple as strobes? Is there something, on the outside of your building that says, hey, we're in an emergency, parents, stay back, like, or whoever's arriving, visitors who are arriving at your school, there's something going on here, no one's coming in the building. There's lots of different, there's simple things you can do, literally with strobes. There's more complicated things you could do with signage. And think about the dual purpose for a lot of these. So maybe that signage that you want to use can remind everybody what time worship services start at when they're inside your building, but also can provide the emergency communications when you need it. And then think about who on your campus and where on your campus those emergency communications can start, and put, simple things as button presses, maybe, in the same closet where you can turn your church bells on and the greeters know where that is so they can go in there. There's lots of options to think through that way. Um, you know, that is like emergency response, right? Other systems in your school, like cameras and door access, serve a purpose as well. They can be a deterrent for people who are, can't get access to your building. See a camera is going to hide from it, and also help you understand what's happening inside your building at the same time. All of those are, those are the three kind of key safety security types of technologies that are typically in all buildings of all kinds. And you should, your school should be secured as a school. And the extension, and when your school life extends into your worship spaces, you need to think about how that is secured like a school as well. It's certainly a delicate and personal way to understand how you make things feel safe and also make things feel welcoming as a faith community. And you can do both, and there's people who can help you do both.
excellent. Thank you, Stacy. Appreciate it. And Dennis, kind of coming back to that collaborative approach and having that team, Patrick had said that he had a compatriot that kind of they were the education side, he was the security side. How did they come together to be able to communicate this culture? So, what are some of the things that you've seen in Florida that you all have done from that collaborative effort?
So now that we're talking about faith-based schools, the trifecta is whoever the faith-based leader of the campus is, because it's oftentimes not the principal or the school administrator. Whatever title, whichever faith it is, they have different titles, but there's usually someone that oversees like the church or religious institute, and then there's a school leader, and then if you're lucky enough to have like a law enforcement based security director, it's having that 3-person team. And what I was thinking about while Patrick was talking is that in the public schools, it was always a struggle to get my school leaders to do drills during lunch, dismissal, and arrival times, because it would, it's more complicated. So once we got that, but once when I went over to the faith-based, I still pushed to do your drills during lunch, dismissal, arrival, but I threw in another wrench, and that is because some of them they are conducting their public faith-based gatherings and rituals and such during school time. They'll be physically separated, but they're on the same general campus, maybe in a different building or so. So convincing them to plan and conduct a drill all together as one campus. So whether it's, the community people and the school at the same time. And that was something that's like next level, but is so important because law enforcement responds to that campus as one location. It doesn't matter if it's happening in building 2 or at the church or the mosque or whichever building it is. That whole campus is going to be affected. So if you can possibly have that team, and again, it starts with the relationship and the comfortableness with all the leaders on that campus, but conducting a drill with community members and school staff and students leads to that growing of that culture in general, because once they do that drill together, they understand all the ins and outs, and they don't, what you don't know kind of scares you. So if the faith-based community hears that the schools are doing these drills off on the side, they don't know what they're doing over there. They just know that they're doing drills because our world is changing, and they never did those drills when they were in school. So getting them all together to conduct and plan a drill together is pretty powerful to build that culture on that whole entire campus.
Outstanding. Thank you, Dennis. All right, so I'm going to go into a couple of things that you all have discussed, and part of that being that team. So one of the things that we do talk a little bit about in PASS is the importance of the team. When we start talking about, is there a template? Is there a way for us to have a starting point? I think everybody here has kind of reiterated the importance of having that team. And, I know, Patrick, you had spoken about it of, having your partner that was on the education side. And I know from the technology side as an integrator, the importance of what it is of having our IT directors and our technology people being part of that piece when we're starting to do physical security as well, and really working towards that. And Dennis, you had mentioned of, making sure that we're getting the community involved. We already have law enforcement involved, but I think it's interesting how all of you have kind of spoken about, all of basically these people that are on this team, and how important it is to get that communication out and work with it, because I really liked what you said, Patrick, of we had to kind of get it into bite-sized pieces. The athletic department, the parents, maybe this building, that kind of thing, of so that you could have that good, clear communication, because everybody is involved in this. So as we start with, where do I start? What are some of the things that we need to do? Building that team is one of the things that's the most important thing. Asking that question, who should be on this team, and how are we going to make and do that effect? So that our famous bubble slide that we have, that challenge of where to start. Patrick, you've done quite a bit in the time that you've done, and Dennis, I know you've been working diligently even before Stoneman Douglas, and kind of putting these things together. So I'm going to kind of kick it off as we talk about some of the recommendations, and start with you, Patrick. how did you get started on just kicking this off? If we are a faith-based school, and this is one of those things where now it's something that is becoming more important, or we have one building or we have multiple buildings, just where do we even start? What is the best way for us to get started?
The the first conversation I had was what was the biggest, I tackled the biggest concern, or the one that kept coming up the most. And it was, we're an open campus. How do we function as an open campus? And so I identified I probably need to talk to our director of school life, our director of spiritual, and then of course myself and that communication and our president. And so the biggest feedback I started seeing was like, hey, they want to make sure that we're open, welcoming campus. And so on the safeties part of that, I said, you know what, we can be an open, welcoming campus after they reach a certain point. That part was very important for me. Yes, we can be open and welcoming, but it's going to have to be after they reach a certain point, meaning they have to come to a control access point where at a certain time each day, all our gates close except for there's one way in and one way out. If they are already a member of our community, they have a sticker, they'll roll right on through. If they don't, then we would have to have what's called inside out communication, meaning someone on the inside of the campus would need to have alerted security that they were expecting someone, a spouse, some type of family member, some type of delivery, whatever it is, so we can have a control of who's coming into that space. And once we started tackling that conversation, and people got comfortable with that conversation, it just led to other conversations. It was like, okay, now that we brought pass in here, pass recommendation is that, hey, we have a guard at the front. Okay, good. We have that taken care of. It also recommended that we have control access points around campus. Okay, we have accomplished that, but also being mindful the school wants to still maintain this feel. And so also have that question always lingers up underneath. How do we how do we execute this security measure without this feeling going away? And so we would always have those conversations back and forth. And sometimes there's a little bit of give and take where, you have to give a little bit more to the school side. And sometimes you would give a little bit more to the security side. But having those conversations within that group or that community of decision makers, it made it a lot smoother. It made things go further and it made people feel valued and included, which is why I've been able to go so fast so quickly. It's because I'm including people in the process, or I'm letting them understand my thought process, and I'm also being mindful of their thought process, and we're laying out a plan together, and it's not a one-sided deal. But we have two different opinions sometimes, but the goal is the same, and so making sure that we get to that particular point.
Thank you, Patrick. I think that's one of the most important things that I've heard in the discussions that we've had and throughout today is, a mentor of mine likes to say that it's all about collaboration and challenging yourself to do better. And it sounds like that's a lot of what you did, Patrick, was collaborating with every stakeholder that's there. But you also put that challenge in front of them of we have to start here, that layered approach to security, that, our welcoming environment comes when we welcome you at this point, which I think is really important of kind of what you were saying there. Stacy, I'm going to have you kind of talk just a little bit about the past, tier one, those processes and roles, and yeah, while you come from that technology side, just speak a little bit on just the importance of having that stuff right before we start looking at the technology.
Right. So as you have in your slide, like tier one, Pass has tiers and then layers. So they're looking holistically at the building and drilling down into, from the outside perimeter all the way into what in a classroom specifically you might need for technology. And I think it's important. We talk about like this open style campus where there might be the worship space in a building and maybe offices for non-school related personnel and in a school building separately, perhaps. Your, worship leader might even live on your near or on this campus as well. So those are all things to take into consider, but there's like that outside perimeter and working your way into the classroom. And then within each of those, looking at what are you doing for communication? What are you doing for cameras? What are you doing for notification? How are you securing those spaces with door locks and access? And it can be very simple with keys. It can be, depending on the size, you might want to go to badges. There's lots of, but the tiers help you go, if I have done everything in tier one, then let me look and say, what in tier two makes sense for this space based on where I am, what our resources are as a faith community, what our surrounding community is like. Where are we? Are we in a rural or more urban setting? There's all kinds of things, and Pass really allows you to walk through that from a technology standpoint. Like, oh, I can page every single space in my building. What's next? What's the next thing I should be looking at and considering and understanding how to work inside our building?
Excellent, Stacy. I appreciate that. And I think that kind of goes into talking a little bit about the guidelines of, where do we start and how do we go about it, and going through, as what Stacy said, is we do take that layered approach. This is that typical security approach that we've seen for decades upon decades of, looking at it from that overall scope from our campus. We say district, but from a faith base, it really comes down to your congregation. So where do we start there from how we're going to communicate, how we're going to secure, moving ourselves into that exterior, that building, and inside of how we kind of take that approach with our policy and procedures, the people that are going to need to be there, as well as that technology that's there. And then we do have the tiers. And kind of as Stacy said, tier one is obviously the great place to start. But one of the things that we did look at from the past perspective is, you know, some things in tier one or tier three or tier four may not necessarily apply to your school. I think Patrick said it really well of, he looks at his campus is more like a college campus. So they've got different buildings that have different that have different activities that happen. And so they're kind of unique in taking a look at that. And also, as Stacy had mentioned, kind of that holistic approach of, as we're looking at it, what are some ways that we can make sure that we're looking at it holistically of, you know, this works for the entire campus. And this is, this works for how we communicate this, or how we're going to secure this, and then be able to dive into a little bit more of what it is specifically for the building exterior as well as into the interior. So here's a quick look of our past layers and components that we have. As I said, I would encourage you to look at the Past K-12 website, and could download these. You can download these guidelines for free. So please feel free to do so. Again, we've got a wealth of resources that are there. And one of the things that I was going to do, and I'm kind of rushing us a little bit because we've got quite a few questions. So I want to make sure I've got time for questions from our panelists. So I'm going to start with, let's see here. And this was a great question. Is there a dedicated week nationally dedicated to school and worship safety? Do we know if there is one?
I
I
don't
was
believe
looking that up when I saw that question. This is National School Safety Week in general, but I don't think
Yep.
there is a specific one for that. Let's start
No.
one.
Exactly. I think that I think that was a
good
great
idea.
question because I saw it and I said that sounds like a great idea. So another question that came in: are there sample emergency plans or templates that somebody might be able to adopt? Does anybody know of anything out there other than we have the framework of PASS of saying here's the questions to ask, here's the policy procedures, peoples you should look at? Kind of throwing that out to the group. Do you know of some templates that might help some of our faith-based organizations?
I give mine away for free that I've developed. It's a plug and play per school, per campus. Um,
Okay.
so- and that goes back to like what I was, you asked the question about how to get started, and that is like number one, because if I could go back and do it again, and someone could have found me this, if you, whether you're the leader or you're the person tagged to be the safety director at your faith-based school, find yourself, because they're out there now, find yourself a credible professional development course that kind of shows you the basics, the foundations, um, and then recruit your team. And then last but not least, use the pass checklist and go assess your campus. And if you do those three things, I think you're like light years ahead of where I was when I started in this world. So
Scott, can I
Thank you.
add something to that?
Absolutely, Patrick.
Something that's been very helpful for me is we in my community we started a private school safety coalition. And so the private schools that are around us within a certain mile radius, we meet every other month, the directors of safety and security and the school counterpart of that person. And so because we're all serving the same community for the most part. And it's a good way to have conversation. Hey, this is working for me. This is not working for me, or this is a problem that I have. How did you fix it? Because it's getting more tailored to your community, and that's been very beneficial for me. And I would strongly recommend it as part of your team building. Like you'll have your team building on campus, but it's also a community building and partnership that should take place as well.
Excellent. And I did see from our chat too, I saw Richard Halloran had said that there is a NEMLEC stars. So you might want to look that up, that they have some plans too. NEMLEC stars. So another question that we have is, does anybody know of grants or ways for faith-based organizations to get money and funding for security personnel and facility improvements?
I know that there are grants. We have not used any though. From the little bit we did look into it, when you got a grant, it kind of opened the door for them to tell you what you could and could not do. And so that was something we did not really want to explore. But I do know that there are grants available for you to get extra security measures in place.
yeah, I mean, the most popular one is the STOP grant. If you just Google the Stop Violence grant or STOP grant, that's a federal grant. But again, like what Patrick said, um, when you take money from a grant, you're tied very heavily to what it is saying. So it's not always directly aligned to what you're trying to do.
Okay, excellent. So one of the questions that's here, and I can answer this one, it was actually in here two or three times. Patrick, how did you go about getting your PASS certification? And then I'm going to expound a little bit on that, on the initiative that we're doing with PASS on that.
So I met an individual, his name was Vernon, and he told me about a gentleman by the name of Jim Crumbly. And I was like, hey, I'm trying to grow out a safer school environment, and I wanted to kind of see if there was a blueprint out. And he told me, say, hey, I run this organization. I'm a part of this organization called PASS. And if you want, we're willing to come on your campus and explore, and we can just start working together. So I had Jim come out here. We had an initial meeting, and then from that meeting, I started meeting with Jim literally every week about just kind of getting our foundation together, what we wanted to do, what I wanted to accomplish on campus. And then once we started getting a good understanding of what the school-wide goals were, we started meeting every couple of weeks. And then we eventually got to the point where Jim or someone from past would come start walking around our campus and giving us inspection. And they eventually got to the point where they gave us a report on 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 their findings. And it wasn't a thing where it's like good or bad. It was more so like, hey, this is what you got going in the right direction. This is our tier one, tier twos, and tier threes. This is what you got working. Here's our recommendations. And then it was back on me to say, okay, this fits for us. This doesn't fit for us. But are we following the safest things possible? Can we at least get tier one in every category, which is something I very much want us to accomplish, which we did. In some categories, we got tier twos and tier threes. And then from there, he was like, hey, I really want to kind of pursue this certification. So Jim came out with a couple of individuals and they did a certification for us.
Excellent. Thank you, Patrick, because you are our first. Because we've discussed about having certifications, but not how to go about it. So That is something that is on PASS's list that we are working on. So we're going to have an initial phase probably come out towards the end of this year, beginning of next year, as far as having an elements of safety certification, kind of going through what the past guidelines are and to be able to be certified for that. But as Patrick said, from a school perspective, our volunteers are willing to come out, help with the assessment of looking at how you align with the past guidelines, that sort of thing, and providing a certification. So for more information on that, please go to the PASS website. You can ask that question. I believe the email address is info@pass.org. Also, if you go to the resources page and under our speakers, you will find all of my contact information. Scott Lord, shoot me an email, and I will be happy to get you that information. We are a little bit close on time, but we do have a couple other questions that I wanted to ask our panelists here is, do you guys have any recommendation or strategies for parts of the day when students are moving between buildings on an open campus?
So I'll take it. For me, like we are an open campus, but we have a hard perimeter. And so that's what we at our time is 8:35. At 8:35, we choke down. We have six gates. We choke down five of them, and so we just have the one main entrance gate. During class changes, though, this is why I usually run three security personnel on campus, maintaining one in each level of the school. We have the one at the guardhouse. During a class change, I will usually have an officer or one of the other security personnel standing in the middle of campus in our front lawn area, where it kind of gives you a 360-degree view of most of the campus. And then there's another one at the top part of campus where you cannot see from that particular position. So while the kids are changing classes or parents are driving through campus, you will see a security personnel at each level, which gives us that it gives the school that safe feeling, but it also still provides that open campus aspect of people you're free to move around as you need to.
Excellent. And Dennis, I got a question here for you. You might be able to help me out a little bit with this on what NCSSD is doing, but I believe one of the question was, what professional development would you recommend if you want more training and or certificates? So
Yeah.
I know NCSSD is working on some stuff.
I just posted the course in the chat, and they're actually the foundational course is awesome for new school safety directors or even ones that have been in there just want to kind of get the best practices, and it's free because we have their scholarships, and so kind of thanks to some donors the fees for those classes are waived, and it's a self-paced class right now. So yeah, that I put it in the chat, but we are trying to NCSSD is definitely trying to put a little standardization into what that job title is all about, because it is a spectrum right now of all types of things. So yeah, check it out. And the resources that people are dropping in the chat are awesome. I've definitely been across most of them as I was in my search to learn, especially the STARS one. That's the one out of Massachusetts. It's really good. So yeah.
Excellent. And then I think we've got one other question. I wanted to double check here because we are right up against the time. Actually, we're a little bit over. But this one started right at the beginning of how the guidelines, how does the past guidelines follow with the new as-is school safety security standard? So I'm going to speak just a little bit to that. We had about four people from the past leadership that was actually part of that. I know our technical committee spent months working on that as we had the first public draft and the second public draft. So one of the things that we really like to try to do there is that as is has done such an outstanding job of putting an ANSI standard together. You know, for a code guy like me, I love codes. I love standards. And so I am so happy to see that that ASIS had put that standard together. And what we kind of say with that is that they helped us build that standard for, you know, our architects and our engineers, for them to something really to hold on to when they're looking at campuses and renovations and new construction and things like that. The past guidelines are the what I'd like to call the handbook. You know, this is This is the guidelines pretty much are well, they aren't pretty much. They are the same as the standard. They're just written in a way for our educators, for our faith-based school personnel and school personnel to be able to read and understand. So I feel that those two align very, very well together and excited that we've seen that come out. I'm going to check real quick to see if we have any other questions, and I appreciate everyone who has spent the time. I think that's most of them. So thank you again for to my panelists, Dennis, Patrick, Denise. That was absolutely awesome. Thank you so much for taking your time and giving us that information. Again, for all of you that are on the webinar, thank you for being here today. We will have this webinar recorded. And if you do have any questions, please feel free to find my information on the PASS website. Shoot me an email or definitely at info@passk12.org, and we will get you the information that you need. Thank you all for your time today, and everybody be safe.